Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Could we just do a quick roll call of the submitter, I'll call them submitter parties for want of a better description, just quickly whiz around the virtual room and just everyone introduce themselves so we know who's on the line, please. They all speak at once.
I'll kick off. Catherine Drew from BBO representing the Waikato Regional Airport Limited.
Morning, Ms. Drew. Your volume's very low. Do you think you can do something about that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Is that better?
That's a lot better, thank you.
Yeah. Matt, you're next. Your corrections, eh?
That's right, Paul, yeah. Sorry, Matt Allett, Boffa School, representing Department of Corrections.
Thanks, Mr. Allett.
And Sean.
Mr. Grice.
Yeah, good morning. Sean Grace here, representing Department of Corrections as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pip Harrell here for Corrections too.
Sorry, Ms. Harrell, we missed most of that.
Sorry about that. When we get to our slot, it will be a different scenario in terms of noise. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And we've got Mr. Horn on silent and invisible.
He's gone swimming by the looks.
Here he comes.
There he is.
That's better.
Depends whose point of view you want to take. We can see you now.
Good morning. Andrew Cantor from Chorus will join me when we get to our slot. I'll just send him a text when we're getting close, and then I'll disappear into the ether till it's my slot.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
All right. Well, let's kick off. Welcome everybody. This is our third virtual hearing. Interestingly enough, there's been a bit of interest from outside of the Waikato district in terms of how this process runs. I think people are seeing this possibly as a bit of a, I was going to say dummy run, but that's probably a bit unfair on all of us to see how this might roll out more widely around the country. So from our point of view, it's worked very efficiently and very well. So we look forward to continuing that today. I suppose the starting point for today is that unlike a lot of the hearings we've had where there's been quite a lot of differing opinions as between submitters and council staff and a whole bunch of issues that are live, we're a lot more focused in this designations hearing. There's a lot of agreement. There's a lot of redrafting being done in cases where it's been necessary, and the parties are very, very close together, it would seem to us. So we're not going to belabor the point and have people read out stuff about how important they are and where their operations are and all that sort of background type information that you'd normally do if you were presenting evidence. We're very keen just to cut to the chase in terms of what the outstanding issue is, and more importantly what it is you think needs to be done to address anything that is outstanding. So I think in this format we can dispense with a lot of the boilerplate, if I can call it that. And the panel, for those of you that have been at the other hearings that we've had online, have tended to run this a little bit more informally, and it's more sort of question and answer as we go, and almost like a workshop / mediation / witness conference. So let's just roll that out and see how we go. We've got a very helpful summary that Ms. McCartney sent us through, I think on Thursday or Friday of last week, which we've all read, and just restating for the record that all the material that has been pre-circulated we have read, and in fact we've already had a preliminary discussion around most of it, so we think we're pretty up to speed, hence just reinforcing the point about cutting to the chase and getting to the pointy end of what it is we need to ultimately recommend back to the various requiring authorities. So I think without further ado, we'll whip into Ms. McCartney to take us through the Section 42A report, outstanding matters. I don't think, Ms. McCartney, as we sort of alluded to, that we need you to read verbatim from what you've circulated, even though it is pretty short and sweet. If you wish to do that, feel free, but we're in your hands, and we have any questions, we might interrupt as you go, and we might just wait till the end. Let's just see how that pans out. So unless there's any questions from anybody, we'll kick into it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to everybody. So as noted, there was an executive summary that was put on the website on Friday. I'm certainly not going to read that. I'm just intending to speak for maybe a couple of minutes just to set out where we've got to. So the executive summary basically condenses section 42 and my rebuttal as well. I've just flagged a question in that report regarding the authority which has been delegated to the panel for the council's own designations. I have framed up my recommendations on the basis that the panel can make final decisions on those, and have also suggested that in terms of the national planning standards, all of the designations be formatted, and I have suggested that maybe that reformatted version could go back to the requiring authorities together with the panel's recommendations on this hearing. So I'm really in your hands on that. Just also want to thank everybody, all of the representatives for the requiring authorities. I'm very grateful that we've been able to work through a lot of the issues. So that's been quite productive from my perspective. So I've just got 3 points that I wanted to make here. I have, obviously you'll see that I have moved quite a lot since my section 42A recommendations, and that's been on the basis of very helpful evidence, including the evidence from Mr. Horn for Chorus. So Mr. Horn and I had a phone discussion a couple of weeks ago about how we could potentially refine some of the conditions for the NORs, and I think that we have landed quite comfortably on that. The Department of Corrections, perhaps this is probably the most, I suppose, snaggy point, if I could express it like that. There are some requests from the department to delete and amend some of the conditions. Now, I'm not quite sure, Mr. Arlett can help me here in the course of this hearing. I just need to perhaps better understand which conditions set out the obligations that need to be met on an ongoing basis. And I had also mentioned in my report there was some reference to it's condition 4.2, where an amendment is requested to that condition. One of the issues that I have there is that there hasn't actually been any formal request to amend that condition through the notice. So just wanting some feedback from Mr. Allard on that as to how this panel or how the council can deal with that matter. My suggestion is that for now that the department go through a section 181 process outside this district plan review, and that's an avenue to comprehensively deal with all of those matters. So
I think just on that point, to the extent that it's realistic in the format that I explained at the start of things, to the extent that we are able to work through those matters of detail, our general preference would be to wrap those matters up where we can, where there's scope and where it's commonsensical and logical to do so. So let's see where we get to when we hear from the corrections folk in a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. And my last point was just on Transpower. The panel will note that there has been 2 sets of evidence that has been put in. I wasn't able to address the second set of evidence for the Mary switching station as part of my rebuttal because that didn't come in time, unfortunately. But Mr. Renton from Transpower, I don't think he's appearing today.
We've said he doesn't need to. He was meant to, but he was scheduled to, and we said we had no questions for him, so
okay,
he's been excused.
Okay, so I thought that their evidence on that site was sound in terms of the section 171 analysis, and just made a mention about the Word document that Ms. Whitney and I have produced over the weekend regarding further leaning down of the conditions. So
Yeah, and that's very helpful, and we're very grateful for that being sent through. As the panel's talked about that particular issue, and that's a perfect example of where we think that's appropriate to put that on the screen and just work through it sort of page by page. We would observe at the outcome at the outset, I think, that there are a bunch of areas where there's a bit of a slightly different approach taken to the different NORs in relation to, say, landscape plans. Sometimes they're in completely, sometimes they're in partially, and we think and the EMF conditions are a bit different between them. So that's, we would prefer, I think your 42A report initially said, we'll go away and take it offline and come back. We think it makes more sense, given that we've got a reasonable amount of time in this hearing, to just workshop it as we go, page by page, and try and address it as we go.
yes, absolutely agree. And so I don't really have anything to add. That's it from me.
Well, that's a record section 42A report in all the hearings we've had thus far, and very helpful. I think just in terms of the NPS format, we've had quite some discussion amongst ourselves and with the staff about the process for making our final decisions version of the plan NPS friendly. And I don't think we'll issue any specific direction, if you like, in relation to that as it relates to designations, because it'll sort of fall out, if you like, in terms of that wider picture that we need to address. But we'll come to that at the end of the day and just give folk a bit of a heads up on that.
Yeah, have we put that minute up on the website yet on the NPS, or is it, Caroline, is that going up? Does that go on the website?
Yeah, and it's already up, and
Okay.
I believe that Sandra's notified all the submitters as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so folk can have a read of that, and maybe just to cut to the chase. In short, there's a methodology that has been set out there in terms of how the staff will proceed, and essentially they're going to do the NPS exercise in a couple of parts. The first part is to get a general guidance document prepared that has feedback from everybody, and then they'll produce a final version of that. That's going to happen over the next month or two. Then they'll just work in the background to prepare a version, our decisions version of the plan based on the notified version. So because that's the document that everybody has submitted on. And in parallel with that, they'll then transfer all of that across into the guidance document framework. And we will issue not a draft decision or interim decision, but we will issue a version of the plan that has our final decisions in it, together with an NPS draft version that will invite comment on the structure and the way that the NPS provisions have been addressed, as opposed to discussing the merits of what we've said in our first document. I hadn't planned to talk about that today, so that's a bit of a rushed and probably slightly confusing statement. But if you have a look at the directions online, they should be pretty clear. So we won't address that any further today, is the short answer to that. Let's just see if there's any questions of you, Ms. McCartney, before we press on. Mr. Fulton?
No, I don't have any questions, but no, a very, very good report. And I think it was very concise. I think it's been very, very helpful for us, the way you've worked through this. It's good. Thanks.
Ms. Tiaho?
No, I don't have any questions at this stage. Thank you.
Mr. Cooney?
No, I haven't got any either. All I'm is forecasting that with both corrections and with Transpower, we just want to check to see if some of the conditions that you're seeking to delete actually have some sort of element of ongoing obligation. And if they do, then you'll have to satisfy us why that should be deleted. So it's a matter of going through those conditions and just seeing, well, is there an ongoing obligation here, or is it something that's fully completed, dealt with, and can be struck out? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mr. Ellett, is Mr. Ellett? Oh, yeah. There he is. Yeah, but I think it's going to be helpful for you to have available and to send it through to Ms. Kelly, the specific provisions that you want taken out, so that we can actually work our way through them, because your evidence, and it's no criticism, your evidence and your summary are sort of points in principle rather than points of detail. So,
yeah, sure.
So we'd be keen to be able to have those on the screen and just very clearly understand what it is you want taken out. You can tell us, we want this taken out for this reason. We can discuss that. And I think our intention would be pretty much to try and resolve it as we go, such that by the time you're finished, everybody on the call will have a very clear view of where they stand.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely reasonable. That's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Ms. McCartney. That's very helpful. And just reiterate what Mr. Fulton said, the report's been very, very helpful. It's got to the point, and we found it particularly helpful. So we're grateful to you and to the parties for the way they've worked with you to get to where we are now. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Drew.
Cool, thank you. Ms. Kelly, can I have slide 4 of my presentation up?
I think we can be reasonably concise in relation to your information, Ms. Drew. We heard from the other day about the airport. The point that you're making is pretty straightforward. Without putting words into your mouth, you're essentially saying the designation is necessary. The height restrictions as they relate to the submitters are way up in the air and won't affect them, and as a consequence of that, the provisions in the plan on the designation should stay as they are. So to the extent that that is helpful, that's our understanding of where you're at.
Well, my job here is done then.
I was wondering that.
Look,
I mean, by all means, take us through things, but I think your evidence and your summary is clear, and I think we understand the point that you're making.
Correct.
So
and
by all means, reinforce anything that you want to reinforce, but I think we've got the gist and we understand where you're at.
Cool, thank you. I think you've really nailed it on the head there. Effectively, the designation is to protect the operation of the airport. As I addressed the committee last week, I highlighted the importance of the airport to the Waikato region. And I guess last week we were talking about overlays in the Waikato district plan and rule frameworks associated with overlays, whereas today we're talking about a designation with the airport as a requiring authority. It seems to me that the submitters have kind of didn't understand the overlay, the designation, sorry, and what has happened is submissions in opposition saying that it was imposed in error and should be uplifted. It's probably fair to say that they haven't provided any evidence to support that here on, so maybe they're accepting what we're saying as well. But as the chairman has alluded to, the obstacle limitation surface sits about 80 to 106 metres above those properties, and so has no material effect on what they can and can't do on those properties. They'd be needing a consent to go through that height plane in any shape or form. So basically, yeah, in summary, we request that those submissions be rejected and the airport's designation be rolled over unchanged.
Okay, no, that's pretty clear. We thought that was the case, and your evidence and your summaries summarise that very helpfully for us. Let's just see if there's any questions. Mr. Yaho?
No questions from me, thank you.
Mr. Fulton?
Yeah, no questions, but I can see where the people are coming from. They're wanting to, and they have mentioned that they want to come in for an application for a rezoning of their land in the country living zone, and they just want to make sure they're protected, and I think that they have misunderstood it. They've collaborated together, the evidence that's come in. So I'm happy with your report and happy to leave it as it stands. Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Fulton. Mr. Cooney?
No, I haven't, but just as a matter of interest, and it's not squarely on point, but what if some of those properties started kids flying a kite or a drone? What happens then?
Oh, that's outside my knowledge, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, the
Okay.
drones are covered through other legislation
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
So-
just think about kite flying and things like that.
A kite at 80 meters would be pretty high. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's more like if you think of it from a practical perspective, if you had a kite in the air and an aeroplane was coming over, you would probably be a little bit careful about that, but it's not going to affect that aeroplane in any significant shape or form. So, yeah. And yeah, drones are covered through other legislation. So if you're working within a certain radius of the airport, you have to call into effectively the control tower.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Cooney. And I've got no questions either. Thank you very much, Ms. Drew.
Thank you.
You're welcome to continue to listen. You're welcome to go, just whatever suits you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horn and Mr. Cantor. Welcome, Mr. Cantor. See you've popped up there.
Morning.
Not sure how you're planning to organise this, Mr. Horn, so we'll just leave it to you to take us through things as you see fit.
Sure. So I circulated a summary statement, and I'm getting the vibe that you don't need me to read that you've read it and are probably across the issue. So I guess I'm in your hands whether you want me to summarise my summary or whether you have read all you require and want to go straight to questions.
I think it's helpful for us, for you to tell us what, if anything, is still outstanding and what it is you're seeking the panel to make a recommendation on, to the extent that it's not already addressed in the 42A rebuttal version. I think that's whatever's still outstanding from your point of view, we'd like to know, and we can then discuss that as needed with a view to sorting it out, if you like, with putting it colloquially, while you're still here, so that we can discuss it with the people that are here. Well, not the other submitters that are here, but between you and Ms. McCartney and ourselves, we'd like to be able to leave this session with this all sorted out.
Okay, well that's relatively easy, and that there were some minor matters in the 42A report where I suggested some change, and I believe I'm 100% aligned on those changes with Ms. McCartney. So those issues were, well, firstly, Chorus was seeking to roll over 8 existing designations and designate 25 new sites. Now, when I say new sites, they're existing facilities. This has happened in other jurisdictions around the country. Typically, someone's made a mistake and not rolled them over 1 or 2 or 3 reviews ago, and it's really just reinstating them back into the plan. So it's not as extensive as it sounds, and it's been done in a number of other district plan reviews. So the only points, I guess, that were raised in the 42A were whether the rollovers or modifications or not. And I think we've both landed that they're not modifications, which means no submissions, no modifications, essentially equals confirm them in the plan as they are. And that was when they got stripped out of the old Franklin district plan into Waikato, when boundaries were readjusted. The way they appeared in the old plan is they had the purpose on the first designation, then they had as above, as above, as above, as above under them. So some of the as aboves got pulled over, and Chorus was just seeking that the actual purpose was put in the schedule. So that's not a modification to the purpose. And the plan has actually been updated, the operative one anyway, now to reflect that. So that's been done as a minor change already. And then there was some corrections to legal descriptions. So in my view, they're not modifications. I believe Ms. McCartney agrees. Aside from that, the new designations is a fairly standard formula that Chorus has been using nationally for a number of years around conditions to control height of masts and antennas, noise from air conditioning and generator equipment and radio frequency compliance. The notice of requirement said that for the Raglan site, it would comply with, there's some sightline controls for a Raglan beacon, and the site at Martangi is under the conical surface of Waikato Regional Airport, and that it would comply with that. Ms. McCartney suggested that that be confirmed by survey. So we've talked a bit about that. The height limits at the Raglan site range from about 10.3 metres to 12 point something. So we've agreed that survey is probably only necessary over 8 metres in height. So if you're doing low level work, it's probably not necessary. And on further investigation into the airport, there's a very large headroom above what's enabled by the designation, so that condition isn't even necessary. There's like 70 or 80 metres headway at least. Apart from that, there's really no other matters I wish to raise, Mr. Chairman. I believe we are aligned on those, and I'm in your hands if you want to question me about that.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. So just to be very clear, in terms of the appendix to the section 42A rebuttal report, if we were to recommend back to Chorus the provisions that are in there, you'd be satisfied with that?
I haven't got that in front of me now. I believe so. What I'll do...
I think you'd better check and do it perhaps while corrections are on, because we want to leave here very, very clear as to where we stand. What we don't want to do is to assume that and then find that there are some outstanding issues later on. We'd really prefer to sort it out. So when we get to the corrections, will be after you. And while that's happening, if you could just refresh your memory on that, liaise with Ms. McCartney, on cell phone or something if you feel you need to. But just by the end of this session, it would be good just to land everything in relation to Chorus, please.
No problems.
Thank you. Let's just see if there's any questions. Mr. Cooney?
I think you've answered my query. Was that the conditions you've got are really quite standardised throughout the country, are they?
Yes, that's correct. It's essentially the same package that gets pitched everywhere.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tiaho?
No questions from me. Thank you.
Mr. Fulton?
No questions either. Thanks. Fine.
No, and I've got nothing either. Thank you, Mr. Horn. So we'll just talk to you in a minute or 10 after we've gone through the corrections submission. So thank you very much. And to Mr. Cantor.
All right, thank you.
We'll talk to you later. Thank you. If you want to mute yourselves or go, what's the word, black in terms of the screen and stuff, so you can do some work in the background, just whatever suits you is fine with us. He's taken that to heart. All right, thank you. Mr. Ellett, Mr. Grice for Department of Corrections, please.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone.
Sorry.
I think just further to sort of obviously some commentary earlier from the chair, I'd encourage Ms. Kelly. I don't know whether you can bring that up on the screen. The Appendix C modifications sought to the Spring Hill Corrections Facility designation text. Are you able to do that, or shall I do it from my end?
Yep, I can do that, Matt. Just bear with me for a few minutes.
Thank you for that. Just while that's coming up, I think just to re-canvas things, I guess there are a couple of matters there within proceedings that corrections have sort of fallen into the position where they're happy, namely the Heritage New Zealand issue. Everyone's in agreement on that, as is, I guess, the Saxton submission point that's been addressed, which really leaves to this discussion. I'm really happy about the ability just to work top to bottom through this this document that's on screen now, because I think that will hopefully leave us in a position where we've got some solutions in play by the time we leave this call. So if everyone's happy, if we could just move from top to bottom, because essentially this is the strike-through version of text amendments and or deletions, and if that's okay, this is where it all sits really in terms of the corrections position and whether or not they're acceptable or not to the panel. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's helpful.
Good stuff. Cool. Well, look, I think Sandra, can you scroll, or can I do that? I'm sorry, I'm just. Sandra might need to just scroll down.
No, I have control of it from here. So you just tell me what you want me to do, and I will do it.
Okay, sure. Well, look, just an opening. Again, this is a tidy up exercise as far as corrections are concerned. Obviously, using this this RMA process to do so, and some consideration of all designation conditions have been given. Firstly, and I think just to take you through, the rationale and reasoning is in the right-hand column there, with respect to any changes sought. And so, in the case of that first deletion, corrections seek the removal of this reference to the Environment Court decision. Obviously, the designation text is to be modified in relation to that decision. So that will come on subsequent to discussion about things further below, I suspect. So if you could scroll down further, please. Condition 1, again, this relates to a whole bunch of plans that were pre-construction. We say let's amend this condition to refer to future buildings and activities only, as obviously initial works have been completed and in accordance with those plans.
Could I just make a point there?
Sorry, yeah. Thanks, Mr. Grace.
Sorry, just as context, I was the author of this notice of requirement. So the link there back to the designation itself, or the notice of requirement, is actually under Part B of the preamble, the scope of the designation, which is just above. And most notably, that last bullet point, you can actually see at the top of the box there, all other associated or ancillary land use activities and all structures and facilities associated with corrections facility. And this is important, as more particularly described in attachment 1 to the notice of requirement. So that's the link back to all of the approved plans package.
You can just flick up, Sandra, could you just go back up a little bit? Okay, yeah. So that's the range of stuff you can build under the designation.
Yeah,
that's correct. That's the nuts and bolts as the scope, essentially.
Yeah, and then come down there. That condition there.
Okay, that's clear enough. Ms. McCartney, do you have a view on this one? You're on. I think you need to unmute yourself.
Where is she?
There she goes. She's back.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. On the face of it, it looks, that strikeout looks okay.
I suppose the only question from me, and I think it does, that refers to a bunch of plans that relate to those existing works. And presumably those plans are in there for a reason, because they relate to the scale of something or the location of things relative to boundaries or things of that nature. Have those all been given effect to? So are those plans now redundant in terms of the built environment that exists, or are there a bunch of those initial works that would actually be picked up under the residual aspect that you're proposing?
Look, I'll have a crack at answering that first. In short, these plan references relate to plan documentation at the time of construction. So in short, that they've been completed. The built form is established. It has been for 12 years, and the plans are therefore redundant. Mr. Grace may have a further view on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. And most importantly, the preamble there, 1.1, the initial works to give effect to the designation, that's what the condition is in predominant reference to. So we've sought to remove that text because it is what it is. The initial works, which were given effect back in 2005 when it was constructed and became operational in 2007.
But our point is that all the works that are referred to in those plans, and presumably they were referred to for a reason at that time,
yes.
They have in fact either been completed or won't be undertaken at all because they're now redundant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. And Pip probably might have a comment on that.
Yeah, no, they have been completed.
Okay. Does the panel have any problem with what's being proposed?
No, I haven't. It's the ongoing works are caught by the bottom condition by the looks of things.
Yeah, that's subject to a roundup at the end. Ms. Tiaho, Mr. Cooney, any problem with the removal of those provisions there?
No.
I don't have a problem with the principle of removing the conditions on the basis that's just been explained, but it would be really good to hear from the Section 42A reporting officer that that's her understanding as well, that all of those things have been completed and there's nothing left to be done.
I guess just on that, on relying on feedback from the department to confirm that is the case. So I personally don't have any problem if all of those works that are outlined in those plans, if that's all done and dusted, then I have no problem with the deletion. Just while I've got you in, just a very minor matter, there are some historic references to managers. So down the bottom there, we've got, and subject to the satisfaction of Waikato District Council Group Manager Environmental Services. This is something that's come up, you'll see later with the Transpower conditions. I've just made a suggestion there that that we just say to the satisfaction of council.
Are you jumping ahead of us?
It's just the last line of what's on the screen there.
Yeah, the last, sorry, the last, yes.
Well, I suppose my comment would be, or question is, I think good reason has been given why they can be deleted, but what is the problem with leaving them there? I mean, is it essential they get removed just for tidiness? Is that the key to it, or why do they need to be deleted? I mean, that inoperative, from the fact that you just had explained that they're redundant for the fact that they've been used and covered by other regulations, but you know, is there a problem if they stay there?
I'll provide a quick response to that. Look, in short, but no, not really. This is a tidy up exercise. And look, each and every time corrections seek to do something within that designated site, I guess they need to work their way through the suite of conditions, as does anyone who's looking at this this suite of plan conditions. So it's really just simply a tidy up exercise because they are redundant, and moving forward, it's for the purpose of clarity and completeness. It's to basically get with the current state of play in terms of where Spring Hill is at as a corrections facility, what's been built, and making sure that they're not circumnavigating their roles or responsibilities as a requiring authority against the conditions on an ongoing basis. That's where these amendments have been drafted on that basis for obvious reasons. So moving forward, we need to comply with the purpose and intent of the conditions on an ongoing basis, but where there is some historical referencing, that's where these amendments are kicking in. It's simply a tidy up exercise to answer your question.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Okay, well, I think let's keep going. I think we're happy in principle, but let's go back through these a second time once we've got to the end and fully understood the totality of what's being talked about. So let's press forward.
Fine. So if we could scroll down, please, Ms. Kelly, to the next suggested change. Again, as you'll see, a lot of these conditions are obviously retained as is for obvious reasons. That's the ongoing nature of them. But if we get down to the next...
we want to look at 4.2.
Can we just look at 4.2 while we're going through?
Yeah, sure. Let's go from top to bottom. So this, not I guess in a principled fashion, not dissimilar to what Ms McCartney's just suggested around making amendments to how you refer to council as opposed to a manager of environmental services or the like. What we're seeking here under 4.2 is essentially some flexibility around entities to which this condition refers to. And in short, or successors has been suggested, because recent discussion between Corrections and Waikato District Council has been, well, what are the entities to be mentioned within this condition to make sure that we're not missing something here in terms of something moving forward, because as we're all aware, entities and names of such can change every 5 minutes potentially. And so we're wanting to, based on correspondence with council recently, essentially provide just a bit of flexibility around that. So when preparing legal documents and the like around this, that it's covered off and we haven't got any sort of technical issues, could I put it like that. Ms Harrell might be able to make some further comments in relation to this, as she's been at the coalface of those discussions with council. I don't know whether you've got any comments there, Pip?
Yeah, I suppose just a little bit of background is we've recently been working on condition 4.3, which is a memorandum of encumbrance, which needs to go against the title of the facility. And just when we came to put the names, so 4.3 references the iwi party listed in 4.2. And our lawyer pointed out that some of the entities listed are no longer the registered names of those organisations. So that's where our communication with council kind of started. And we've just asked if they knew what the update to those was. They knew for one, and directed us to the iwi parties for the others. And really all we wanted to do was just ensure that these conditions, you know, just acknowledging that over time, names of organisations such as these iwi groups will change and have changed. And it would just, we thought it was a good idea as part of this process to be able to add something like "and successors" to the end of it to ensure that the conditions were relevant going forward into the future.
Thank you for that explanation. So what is it that the version that we're seeing on the screen at the moment, what is it that you're proposing to just to add and their successors?
Yeah, and successors at the very end of the sentence, at the end of 4.2.
That's or successors, sorry, just to...
Oh, sorry, or successors.
Or their successors.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Just a point here. So obviously this wasn't an issue that we had flagged at the time that the notice of requirement was prepared. That's obviously come up since, as Pip has alluded to. And just in terms of the section 42A report, which has suggested if there was to be a change, that it, I think Ms McCartney supported including or mana whenua, or you might just want to butt in there, Jane, but it's not something that I would support, given through the notice of requirement process, those were the identified parties that would be consulted with in terms of this memorandum of encumbrance moving forward. So including mana whenua as the term in lieu of those specific parties raises some questions for me as to then whether the ability for parties that weren't otherwise party or identified at the time would then be able to join the process. So I just have a bit of a concern around that, and that's why I think the or successors is a better outcome here for this particular condition.
How does that work with condition 4.4, which just refers to tangata whenua in terms of being provided access to the springs? Doesn't that create a similar problem?
I think that one's slightly different in that it is purely for access purposes. So, I mean, my understanding of having access to the puna is so that if there's cultural activities, if people have to go and wash in the puna, that kind of thing, then they're allowed access by corrections. It's through this memorandum.
No, I understood. No, it's okay. You don't need to explain it any further. That's okay. I understand.
Thank you.
I mean, Ms McCartney, it would seem on its face, subject to anything the panel may say, that this is just a clarification and a consequential updating. It's hard to see how anybody would be prejudiced by the change, because if the Waikato Raupatu Lands Trust ceased to exist, It would simply record the fact that when they don't exist anymore, or if they don't exist anymore, the party that replaces them has standing under this condition. So it would seem to me, at least, to be a bit of a victimless crime, and really doesn't, it causes no grief to anybody. But I'd be keen to hear from the rest of the panel, particularly Ms. Te Aho, around that issue.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Chair. I just would have thought maybe the corrections might have approached those parties just to get, you know, a letter or an indication of their support. But yeah, I can't see what the prejudice would be.
Do those entities, are they still all in existence as at the moment, like the Ngāti Ngaho Cooperative Society and the Hohora Marae Trust? Do they all still exist?
I'm not sure about the Ngāti Ngaho one, but Waikato Raupatu Lands Trust still exists. And I would imagine that the Hora Marae Trust would still exist.
Probably does. Okay.
Names may change. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me, and I agree with the explanation about 4.4. Tangata whenua is broader, but that's about who
that's about access.
Yeah, this is who are the people that are required to be to agree to certain things, and that's a more limited group of entities.
Okay, that sounds good. Mr. Cooney, anything from you or from Mr. Fulton?
No, I'm happy with that. Sensible.
Yeah, no, I have no comment. I think it's sensible.
Okay. Well, I think, again, subject to a quick whiz through once we get to the end, I think we're comfortable with that change. And you don't have any objection to it, Ms. McCartney?
No, no, I don't. I think that it is a common sense approach. My issue was more to do with whether there was the technical or legal ability to tweak it, that's all.
Yeah, we've taken the approach all the way through these hearings that where it's sensible and non-prejudicial to any party, then we're quite comfortable about making changes to make the plan more, you know, robust and more user-friendly. And I think that's in that category. It's not seeking to take parties off. It's not seeking to impose any new obligations on anybody. It's simply a tidy up to make the condition work in the way that it's intended and for it to endure. Because the alternative, theoretically, might be to do a Section 181 change because one of those entities doesn't exist anymore, which would be a complete waste of time.
Yeah,
so that's why we're pretty relaxed. We don't think there's a scope issue that affects anybody.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep moving.
Okay, scrolling down if we could to condition 6.1 in particular. The proposed deletion there is with respect to the landscape and visual mitigation and monitoring plan and the timing of such. That's been prepared and approved by the council. The balance of the condition obviously remains.
Why would that condition not then say that landscaping shall be undertaken in accordance with the landscape and visual mitigation and monitoring plan dated... Why do you need all that other stuff?
The background, well, I guess the answer there was that the landscape and visual mitigation monitoring plan at the time hadn't been finalised, and that's why they gave that 6-month period to actually submit that plan for approval.
No, I understand that, but that's 11 years ago or whatever. Why have we got all these provisions about what the plan must be prepared to include if the plan already exists and it's sitting on someone's desk or on a shelf? Why can't that condition just say landscaping and visual mitigation shall be undertaken in accordance with the landscape and visual mitigation and monitoring plan prepared by the department dated X,
and approved by council,
as already approved by council?
Yeah, there may be another condition from memory that provides that implementation.
Yeah, but that's a separate issue. Let's just scroll down and see because presumably there's an ability to change it, which I think is probably what you're saying.
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
But
in fact,
that's different.
Been updated recently.
But this seems to me to be a bit back to front, to be honest. because that plan already exists. And if there's some requirements about what a modification to it must satisfy, then those provisions should be where it relates to the modification, I would have thought. Can we just scroll down a little bit further, please?
I think to your point, 6.2 starts to capture that in principle, doesn't it? In terms of the ongoing nature of this. And less is more, I totally agree for what it's worth in terms of your suggestion around 6.1.
Well, 6.2 is partly redundant too, isn't it? Because following receipt of written approval to that plan, well, that's already been given. It just needs to say the Minister of Corrections shall implement and maintain the approved landscape monitoring plan in accordance with the implementation strategy, which I know refers back to the bits that we've deleted, but those bits should be in 6.2.
Yeah, I take the point there. I guess in terms of the notice of requirement process, the approach was to take a lighter touch as possible. We didn't want to go... No,
I understand that. It's not a criticism. We're just looking to try and make things work as best as they can. And you've raised the issue about making it work properly and being logical. And obviously what I say is always logical. So it seems to me to make sense to if it means it's more logical to put bits where they belong, then that's what we should do.
Thank you, sir.
So you don't need all that detail, really. That's the point we're making.
Yeah.
Just while we're on it, then
you might need some of it. Let's maybe just go back and see what it is that's there. But to go back all the way to a strategy that says what the purpose of it is and everything, given that the council still has an approval role in terms of the new plan. I mean, I'd be inclined to get rid of it all and just say following receipt, not following receipt, sorry. The Minister of Conservation shall implement and maintain the approved plan in accordance, take out all that in accordance with, the approved, the implementation plan may be modified by written agreement with the corrections and the council. The council's not going to agree to something that's shabby. It's going to look at the existing plan. And I just think we get rid of all that waffle because it's ancient history. And presumably you've already done the planting. It's already in place.
Yeah, it's established.
What does the panel think?
Yeah, I tend to agree. One of the background to this, to these setting out that detail in that condition above 6.1, because there was some case law years ago to say, well, you can't just have a management plan. You've got to set out in the conditions of consent the objectives of what the management plan should be achieving, and that's why that's all set out like that. And then the landscaping plan is then framed according to those objectives. So it's already up and running in accordance with those objectives. So I agree with the chair.
So can we just scroll?
Sorry, Phil. I think one of the advantages of having the detail easily accessible is that people just need to go to one place. So given that this is an e-plan, is it possible, when you say the minister shall implement and approve and maintain the approved landscape, have the name of the plan there, and it's in the highlighted kind of style that somebody can just press on and then get that access to that plan? Because I think for the reader who wants to know whether corrections is complying with the conditions, that then they're now going to have to go to a completely different document. So I think that document should be made easily accessible if we're going to take out the detail. That's the advantage of it all being in one place, I think. I get what you're wanting to do, and I like streamlining too, but that would be the reason, I think, of having the detail in the condition, is for the people who want to ensure compliance.
The people that would be wanting to ensure compliance would be the council and the requiring authority. There's nothing of a compliance nature, I don't think, in those provisions really, is there? That just says when you prepare a plan, it's got to meet these obligations. And it's got to be approved by the council. The council has approved it and it's already in place. So there's already a base document that exists that says this is what you have to do. And then I suppose the issue then is you need to be able to keep that plan up to date if circumstances changed for whatever reason. But whether that needs all that other background information, I'm not 100% sure. But I take the point that you're making.
Can I suggest something here too, Mr. Chair? One option would be to, you know, rather than having all the screeds of detail, which, you know, I support, I'm certainly in favour of Jenny Craig landscaping conditions. The National Planning Standards do enable an option of hyperlinking to documents such as this, so that may be an option.
Well, I think that's what Mr. Yahoo was suggesting, and I think if we do that, is the panel happy with us? Can we just go back to 6.1, please, Ms. Kelly? I'd rather someone write these words down so that we get a landing on them, if it's possible. That if condition 6.1 were to read, landscaping and visual mitigation and monitoring for the entire site shall be undertaken in accordance with the landscape and visual mitigation and monitoring plan prepared or dated, whatever the date of it is, and approved, and which has been approved by the council. Does that work? And then all that other stuff comes out.
And I'd probably add, including any ongoing obligations required under that plan, something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then when we get to 6 point, we might get someone to, anyway, let's get down to the next page, please, Ms. Kelly.
So, Mr. Chair, if I have got this right, what you're saying, I agree with your wording there. The plan that is there then just sits in the background somewhere, and it can be referred to again.
Yeah, well, that's what we want. If we just go back up a little bit, back into 6.2.
Yeah.
We need. I think we're saying we need a version of 6.2 that says correct. I'm not dictating anything, but corrections can update the plan at some future date going forward, provided that it's only implemented if it's been approved. Any changes to it have first been approved by the council.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems sensible to me.
I just can't see why we need to say that when they change the plan, it's got to refer to, 7-wire fences, and, it just seems to be a huge amount of unnecessary detail if you look back up the page.
Yeah.
And if corrections want to completely change it, and say, well, we want to replace all the beautiful native plantings with a field of gorse, then council's not going to approve it.
No.
Condition 6.2 does have a type of ongoing maintenance requirement there. You'll see,
yes,
Minister of Corrections shall implement and maintain the improved plan.
I think that's probably worthwhile keeping, isn't it? It's more the in accordance with the implementation staging plan, because that's all been done.
Yeah. Yep.
So maybe that change that you referred to, Mr. Cooney, for 6.1, we don't make there, but we leave in 6.2.
Yeah.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Sort of, yeah. Oh, I'd leave both in, really.
Okay, all right, no, that's cool. That's fine. So 6.2 could say something along the lines of, so you delete the the first line all the way down to the comma after environmental services and say, the Minister of Corrections shall implement and maintain the approved landscape and visual mitigation and monitoring plan.
You don't actually maintain a plan, do you?
No, you don't. You maintain the works.
Yeah.
Why don't we just say the Minister of Corrections shall implement the approved landscape and visual mitigation and monitoring plan and maintain the associated works
Yep.
full stop, and then leave the last sentence, the approved, but not the approved implementation staging plan, but we refer to the landscape and visual mitigation and monitoring plan may be modified by written agreement between Minister of Corrections and the Council.
Yeah.
I think whilst we said that we want to get this all nailed while we're all sitting here, I don't think it's helpful to draft by committee, but what I am going to suggest is that at the end of the correction session, that they take this away and report back to us during the day with a clean version of this that we can sign off on, at least in principle.
I agree. That would be more than useful. And I think just back to 6.2, I mean, it's really the modification issue in terms of that discussion just there. The proposed amendments to 6.1, we've got a bit of a double up there, haven't we? It's around the future modification and the acceptance and approval of that by council.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not get into too much drafting. We've given you a pretty clear steer, but
Very
we're
clear.
happy for you to take this away. And Ms. McCartney might be a bit challenged in terms of dealing with it because she's got to deal with the other submissions that we'll be hearing from while you're redrafting. But I think we're all been around long enough to be able to work with a version that you put on the screen a bit later in the day. And we'll figure out when that is once we get to the end of this and see how long it should take. Okay?
Fine, yep.
Right, let's keep moving. Right, 9.2 seems uncontroversial. Yep, that's fine.
Nine 3 in relation to a road that's been built.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sorry, could I just butt in here? Sandra, would you mind, sorry, could we just go back to 9.2? I just wondered whether we're looking at a redundant condition there in terms of construction works that have already been done. Sorry, 9.1? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's construction, isn't it?
It's,
so isn't there likely to, under the designation, there could be new construction, couldn't there?
Yeah, that's correct. And so we've wanted to maintain any condition that could have an ongoing implication for any future works as well. And that one has a maintenance work reference as well.
Yeah.
So that was the reason why that one stayed in.
I think halfway down though, I mean, I think Ms. McCartney makes a good point. We see about 6 lines down, there's a sentence that starts halfway along, just above the cursor that says during construction of the internal access road. Shouldn't that say something like during construction of any additional internal access roads? Because that implies that, that the internal access road doesn't exist, and presumably it already does.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I don't. I think I'd rather just leave that. It's a traffic matter. It looks like 9.2 is the main.
Yeah, I think that's right.
The main provision there as to how when you should be using Hall Road.
Yeah, the only thing I think we need to change personally is during construction of the internal access road. That implies that there's a specific one, and we're talking about possible new ones under a construction condition. But other than that, I think it should stay. So where the cursor is, it would say during construction of any new internal access road. Just to avoid confusion, because the internal road that the condition refers to already exists. So it's not about construction. Yep.
Yep.
Happy with that? Okay, let's keep going. .3. So that's about Hampton Downs Road upgrade, which is done. Understand that. 9.5. That's about design work.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that, okay, I understand that, or engineering design. I understand that, I think.
Yeah, so 9.3, 9.5 and 9.6, all about the construction of roading infrastructure that's being completed.
Why is 9.4 necessary?
I think the reasoning there was the ongoing provision of street lighting. Again, I mean, it's probably a 50-50 one.
Okay, well, if in doubt, let's leave it in. It's pretty
yeah, that
victimless.
was certain. Yeah,
okay,
no, that's
the cool.
approach we took in terms of drafting.
Okay,
the changes,
all right.
Yes.
All good.
So to 10 engineering, 10.1, that's in relation to obviously earthworks activity incidental to the construction phase of this facility.
Okay.
Importantly, 10.2, 10.3 and so forth, they're retained around the ongoing nature of earthworks management plans and the like.
Doesn't exactly the same issue relate to the
landscape
plan? Isn't that, I don't think we want to get into the drafting of it again. It's fairly tortuous to do that, but I would have thought the same principle should apply to the earthworks plan as applies to the landscape plan. Shouldn't
Yes,
it?
although my understanding or my recollection of this one was if an earthworks management plan was deemed to be necessary for any new part of the prison that might be opened up for earthworks in accordance with the purpose of the designation.
Good point.
So that's
actually, that's a fair point, because 10.2 says an earthworks management plan shall be prepared prior to any earthworks commencing. So I think that is different, isn't it?
So that because the
it is different.
landscape.
No, it is different. I think I spoke too soon.
Yeah,
I think we leave it.
Landscape and visual monitoring plan is obviously an ongoing one that can be updated over time.
Yep. Yeah. No, understand.
Management plan is specific to any stage.
Do you agree with that? Rest of the panel, leave it in.
Yeah. I think it's important.
Yep. Good. Let's get going.
Okay. As stated in the right-hand column, the deletion of these conditions is due to the engineering conditions relating to initial construction works only.
Why would you delete 10.5 if it's relating to new earthworks and new building platforms?
Yeah, perhaps that is one that, on reflection, in the same vein as the earthworks management plan, does actually need to stay in there.
And I wonder if 10.4 should as well, but possibly without reference to the water reservoir. Construction drawings detailing the location, form of foundation shall be prepared and submitted. Presumably,
just to capture future buildings. You're right. In principle, that needs to stay in a slightly revised format, as does 10.5.
Oh, sorry, just on 10.4, that's all related to a water reservoir that has been built. So it's the location, form of foundation, and type of water reservoir. So the location, form of, and type of water reservoir, it's all relating to the reservoir which has been built.
Okay, I presume that's because the plans refer to what it is, because I can see now that that's what it means. It's not obvious from first glance. We'll leave you to think about that in your version that we'll get back later in the morning.
At 10.5, liquefaction, I mean, it was referred to in the plan, and I think most of us hadn't heard about the word until it came to the Christchurch earthquake. But obviously it's being referred to here, and knowing just the region it's in, it's probably a pretty important part, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah, and certainly something that would be required through any building consent process as well. But if it provides an extra level of certainty, I think that is one that we'll consider leaving in there.
Yeah,
okay. And I think the same applies to 11, bearing in mind that the existing services are in, but if you're going to continue to use the designation for new stuff, then presumably you still should be preparing plans and submitting them and all that sort of good stuff. You know, you look at 11.2, prior to the commencement of earthworks and construction, the council shall be advised in writing of the methods for water supply and disposal of wastewater during the period of earthworks and construction. I mean, if it was good enough for the original one, I would have thought that would still be relevant.
These relate to the installation of the wastewater and potable water services, so they've already been given effect to. So rather than
I don't know about that, because this is you're looking to be able to do new earthworks and new construction under the designation, and all 11.2 says is that prior to the commencement of those new earthworks and construction activities, you've got to advise the council of the method for water supply and disposal of wastewater during the period of earthworks and construction. You know, and it may be on a standalone part of the property that, you know, doesn't have those services at the moment. And if they already exist, then you just write to the council and say, no news, we're hooking into system XYZ, and the council will tick it off. But to leave it out, I would have thought leaving a bit of a gap.
I will take your point on that one.
Do you think? I mean,
we'll that'll be one we'll reconsider as well.
Okay, yeah, just have a look at that.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at wastewater. Ministry, well, that's been done, presumably.
Yeah.
11.A.1. It's fine. Independent wastewater engineer prior to any monitoring undertaken.
So this was something that was required prior to any initial monitoring works being undertaken on the, or monitoring of the new system being undertaken.
Yeah. But when it refers to at least 10 working days prior to any monitoring, that's in A2, and then A3 says shall fund the monitoring and the discharge for a period of at least 2 months prior to any upgrade commencing. Does that, I don't know the answer to this, does that still anticipate that changes might be made in the future, and the parties that are currently thinking they're going to be consulted on those things in the future won't be?
So the context here of the upgrade is actually the upgrade that was required to the Tikawhata wastewater treatment plant. So that's referred to in that preamble, I think under 11.
Okay.
So in terms of any upgrade, that doesn't mean any subsequent upgrade. It means the upgrade that was required to basically expand the plant to allow wastewater discharges from the prison to be sent to that that plant.
Okay, can we just go back up and I'm going to take your point completely. Let's just see that the wording that we've retained. If we go to 11.8, sorry, just down a little bit, please, Ms. Kelly, just so we can see the bottom of the page and the top. Yeah, that's good. So it's got a maximum flow rate, install flow meters. See, that's another one. The minister shall install appropriate flow meters prior to opening. Well, that's redundant as well, isn't it?
Yeah, correct.
The minister shall maintain appropriate flow meters and provide the data to people. Isn't that the obligation?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, we'll leave that for you to have a play with.
It's an ongoing obligation, though, isn't it? Shall provide.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it should reflect the ongoing obligation, not to say that you shall install them.
No.
Yep. Okay, let's keep going. If anyone else has any comments as we go through, please just don't wait for me to ask. Just chip in. Yeah, I mean, I think on its face, what you say is pretty clear. This is all about an upgrade that's already been done.
That's correct, sir. Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going.
Just on the wastewater one, Phil, just thinking it through, Mr. Chair, we just got to be careful. There could be a considerable new wastewater system over the whole of that North Waikato region at some stage.
Yes.
I'm presuming the conditions that they have here would still be the same, but we just don't want to cut across something new that might develop.
No, I was thinking that myself, but this is still an obligation to hook up to a suitable sewage system, which has been undertaken. If the council was to upgrade the Tikawhata wastewater treatment plant or relocate it or any of those things, it would automatically make provision, I would have thought, for all the existing connectors to that, in the same way that it would for the, the mains and Tikawhata itself, etc. So I think that's okay.
Yeah, no, I accept that. I just was being a bit cautious about saying we didn't cut something out that might affect that. That's all.
Yeah.
When it's being specific to Tikawhata, that was the point I was trying to get to. I think it could be some, we just don't want to cut across. That may no longer exist.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. No, that's all good. I think let's keep pressing on. Looks like we might be at the end.
We've reached the end of the yellow brick road there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. Do you want to go back to the top, or clearly I've taken note that, obviously the likes of Mr. Grace, myself, and Ms. Hurrell need to go away and beaver away at a bit of an amendment sort of to these provisions in accordance with what's been stated, and then perhaps recirculate that in writing. So we've got that for the purpose of clarity.
No, I don't want to just recirculate them in writing. Well, yes, we do want them recirculated in writing, but we want to see them and we want to talk to you about them again before we all disappear from the hearing.
Most definitely.
We want to nail this while we're all here, so that there's no debate and everyone can go away, content that we've solved the problem, as it were.
Yep.
Otherwise, it just stays in limbo, and we don't think that's particularly helpful.
So we're going to stick them down the end of the queue, and then you guys can come back at the end and let us know how you're getting on. That's the plan.
I think that's what I think the plan is. Just looking at our schedule, we've got NZTA after morning tea, which is due shortly, and then we've got Transpower, who are probably going to take a little bit of time, but not long. They might be half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, because they've got a fair bit of detail. How long do you guys think it's going to take you to go through this?
Oh, look, that's not a marathon effort. I think the guidance that's been provided and discussed this morning is pretty clear.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Why don't we tentatively say midday that you touch base with Ms. Kelly and give her a heads up as to where you're at, on the assumption that we would issue the very strong suggestion that by 12 o'clock you've got a version that you can send to her and put on the screen that we can work through quickly.
Sounds good.
And if there's a problem with that, let us know. But other than that, and we may be running a bit late, so I don't know how long specifically we'll take. But if we work on that basis, I think that should work.
Okay, that's fine. We'll get underway.
Yeah. We might be virtual, but we like to make it work. Yeah.
Noted.
I would have thought it's in your interest to do it as well, just quietly.
Yes.
No, thanks to the panel for giving us that opportunity. We'll certainly take that.
Okay. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this morning's first session. So the session after morning tea is on a different call, so that that's to manage the flow of people in and out. Anyone that wants to join back in again to that session, I think you've got the link to that already if you want to come back. Obviously the corrections folk will need to come back at midday-ish or thereabouts, but you should have the link to enable you to do that, but it's a different link from this one. And if you haven't got it, if one of you contacts Ms. Kelly, she'll be able to reissue it to you.
Ms. Kelly, would you just be able to do that in any event, just so we've got it in case some of our folk have either deleted that, not anticipating that would be in that session?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Well, what I think we'll do, we'll adjourn now for morning tea. So if we can stop the recording, please, Ms. Kelly.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Did you want Chorus to close out before you shut the session down?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry, my mistake. Yes, we do want you just to clarify where you got to, please. Sorry, Mr. Horn, my apologies.
Is corrections finished or?
Yes, yeah.
100% happy with the Appendix 1 and 2 changes in the rebuttal. I understand the descriptor changing from U to C and Z will happen as part of the National Planning Standard workstream, so it doesn't need to be dealt with here.
And I think you can stop after the first sentence, can't you? 100% happy with Appendix 2 and 3.
Probably. The only thing that isn't in the rebuttal is there's 2 errors on the mapping layer in the plan, which in the 42A report, paragraph 280, Ms. McCartney recommends that be corrected, and if that can just be reflected in your recommendation, that would be helpful.
Yep.
Ms. McCartney, you're happy with all of that? I think you're on mute. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it was just an issue with the way that the council GIS data aligns with the LINZ's core record system. So easy fix.
Okay, so as between Chorus and staff, there's now no outstanding issues. Yeah.
No outstanding issues yet.
Perfect. No, that's very good. And sorry for forgetting to come back to you, Mr. Horn, but that's good news.
Cheers.
All right, if we can. Sorry, Ms. Kelly.
Matt, I've sent the link through to Pip and Sean and yourself.
Thank you. That's been received.
Right,
That's excellent. And sorry, Mr. Grace, I think I might have called you Mr. Grice earlier because your name came up very small on the screen. Hope that didn't cause too much offence.
No offence taken. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. If the panel could just perhaps, if everyone can log out, because the session's now adjourned. If we can stop the recording, please, we might just quickly